Hey guys, this is my informative speech about PTSD in soldiers. PTSD is an anxiety disorder that people can get after a traumatic event. The event can be anything from sexual abuse, war, or a terrorist attack. It's normal to feel sad, alone, or scared after a traumatic event, but this should fade, and if it does not, they should seek help. Some symptoms of PTSD are re-experiencing the traumatic event, avoidance and numbing, and increased anxiety. Treatment for PTSD is hard because you cannot just take a pill and be okay. They have to go through lots of counseling. They have to explore their thoughts and feelings about the trauma, work through guilt, self-blame, learn how to cope, and address problems PTSD has caused in their life and their relationships. Sometimes people will take medication to help deal with the depression or the anxiety. I want to talk about PTSD in soldiers. Director Carlos is a soldier who has finally accepted he has PTSD. In 2004, he was diagnosed with PTSD by an Army doctor, but he refused to believe it. In 2005, they told him he needed to talk about it. Once again, he refused to believe it. He refused to believe it because he was a soldier. He was tough. He continued to fight until September 2010, 5 years later. Something triggered an anxiety attack. When he came home from battle, he thought he could just move past this and just ignore it. But he was a chaplain. He had to tell families that their loved ones weren't coming home. Even though he was home, he never left the battlefield. This took a toll on his family. To help cope with this, he turned to alcohol. He was afraid that getting the help he needed would make the military say he was a burden on the system. A quote from him says, "Coming home from battle seems like one of the easiest things to do. It seems like you just get on a plane. But after hours of spending hours, weeks, and months of getting help and talking to someone about my wounds, I'm only beginning to understand how to come home. I am, in our American culture, where someone would identify as a broken or a deadwood soldier. I have no bullet holes to show my wounds. I will not get any medals to recognize them. If I did, I would not be afraid or ashamed to wear them in our present culture. As with many of us, my wounds are the invisible kind, the type we bear on our soul. I'm not ashamed of them. For me and for others like me, they are just as real as the ones that bleed. I'm getting help because I am tired of not being home. It is time for me to come home. It is time for all of us to come home. My name is Hierta, and I'm an American soldier. I am not ashamed of my wounds. I have no genetic failings. I am proud of my service, and I'm going home. Let's go home together. The military has screenings, but they are not required. A soldier can come home and never know he has PTSD. A quote from a book tells about a soldier who comes home and who's struggling. "You aren't just able to shut it off," Steve asked clearly, "because I can't. If I'm in public, I feel like I'm going to start crawling out of my skin. People get too close, crowds are noisy. It's like there's an enemy I can't see, but I know he's there." This quote shows how the war affects soldiers, even after they're home. Soldiers know about PTSD, but in their minds they're supposed to be tough and strong. Since they are trained to think this way, most of the older officers don't believe in PTSD. While the military is taking some steps to make it easier and more accepted to seek care, it is still a long ways to go, said Jason Hansman of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of Americans. Even with top military officers coming out and saying they seek help for PTSD, it is not enough to correct the stigma, Brennan of 2012 said. So, even though soldiers know that there is PTSD, when they find out they have it, they ignore it because they don't want to be labeled weak. There are two main types of counseling for soldiers with PTSD. The first is cognitive therapy, which is when your therapist helps you understand how to change and think about trauma in the aftermath. The goal is to understand how certain thoughts of trauma can cause stress and symptoms to become worse. The second one is exposure therapy. This is the goal where to have less fear about the memories. It teaches them to be in control of their fears, thoughts, and feelings in situations that remind them of the trauma. The military itself does not have a reintegration program. There are outside groups that do. The biggest one is the Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program, the YRRP. This was created in January 2008. YRP is a duty-wide effort to promote the well-being of National Guard and Reserve members, their families, and communities by connecting them with resources throughout their deployment cycle. Through YRP events, service members and loved ones are connected with local resources before, during, and after deployment. Reintegration programs post-delay is a critical time for members of the Guard and the Reserve, as they often live far from the military installation and members of their units. In conclusion, there is help for PTSD out there for soldiers who are looking for it. Soldiers should not have to seek help. They should be given it right away. The military should have mandatory screenings and a reintegration program for soldiers. This would help with substance and alcohol abuse, suicide, and depression. There is something This is something the military needs to do so that the soldiers who served and protected our country will get help. Thanks for watching, guys.